Good afternoon, happy Friday. Well, it's been a couple weeks since I have done Preach It Friday, but we're back, and today's verse is Acts 2:21. Now, before I get into the reading, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Acts chapter 2 is the famous chapter of Pentecost. The disciples were just praying and meeting together as they waited for the promise of Holy Spirit. Then, on the day of Pentecost, a Holy Spirit came, enabling them to speak in other tongues and resting on each of their heads as a tongue of fire. This drew a big crowd, and it was awesome, and people were like, whoa, this is amazing. But some began to mock the disciples, claiming that they were only drunk. Then Peter got up, and he started preaching. This began in Acts chapter 2, verse 14, and I'm going to read starting there through verse 21. This is from the Passion Translation. Peter stood up with the 11 apostles and shouted to the crowd, "Listen carefully, my fellow Jews and residents of Jerusalem. You need to clearly understand what's happening here. These people are not drunk like you think they are, for it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. This is the fulfillment of what was prophesied through the prophet Joel. For God says, 'This is what I will do in the last days. I will pour out my spirit on everybody and cause your sons and daughters to prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will experience dreams from God. The Holy Spirit will come upon all my servants, men and women alike, and they will prophesy. I will reveal startling signs and wonders in the sky above the mighty miracles on the earth below. Blood and fire and pillars of clouds will appear, for the sun will be turned dark and the moon blood red before that great and awesome appearance of the day of the Lord. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." After these verses, Peter went on to declare Jesus as the Messiah, and those who heard the message were cut deeply to the heart, and they responded in faith. The end result was that 3,000 people got saved that day, and they were baptized and added to the church. What Peter was quoting was a prophecy that came from Joel chapter 2, verses 28 through 32, and I'm going to read that in a second. But first, I didn't really know much about Joel, so I went back and read it. It's really short, it's only 3 chapters, and it's not the most uplifting for the first part, but then you get into some of the prophecies that we read about in Acts chapter 2. Joel opens with a scene of desolation, which is brought on by an army of locusts. Then, in the beginning of chapter 2, the locust army is described as it marches against Jerusalem. God is at the head of the army, leading the way. Though the locusts come and strip bare all the vegetation and the crops, God urges his people to turn back to him. He then begins to tell them of all that will come. The wilderness will become lush and green again. Grain, wine, and olive oil will overflow. The people of Israel will be restored. And in verses 28 through 32, we get what Peter quoted, which I'll read in the NLT. "Then, after doing all those things, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. In those days I will pour out my spirit even on servants, men and women alike, and I will cause wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun will become dark, and the moon will turn blood red before that great and terrible day of the Lord arrives. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, for some on Mount Zion and Jerusalem will escape, just as the Lord said. These will be among the survivors whom the Lord has called." The remaining third of the book of Joel speaks of the judgment that God will bring to Israel's enemies and the fruitful refuge that he will be to his children. The title of my message today is A Splash of Fire. God said, both in Acts 2 and Joel 2, that he would pour out his spirit on all flesh. I'm going to look at some of the words for pour out. We've got the Greek word in Acts 2, which is ekeo. It means to pour forth, to bestow, gush out, run greedily out, shed, or spill. And this verse is, the word that's in this verse is often used in connotation with the shedding or spilling of blood. So someone dies and their blood is shed. Jesus' blood is shed. It's that kind of pouring out we're talking about here. Then the Hebrew word for pour out in Joel 2 is very similar in meaning. It's shafak. It means to spill forth, blood, a libation, liquid metal, or even a solid. Also to expend, intensively to sprawl out, cast up, gush out, pour out, or shed. And according to the notes in my Passion Translation, the Aramaic phrase can be translated, "I will be splashing my spirit wind over all flesh." I don't know how you've pictured Pentecost, but I have never imagined God splashing his spirit over everyone present. But what a free, fiery expression of his lavish love. Have you ever gotten into a splash battle in the pool or at the ocean? I used to all the time when I was a kid, and occasionally I still do. Somehow or some way, one person splashes another, whether intentional or unintentional, and before you know it, everybody is shooting water at everyone. People you weren't even aiming for are getting sprayed with wetness, and usually there's a lot of laughter and carefree giddiness involved. I don't think that's too far off from how God pours out his Spirit. Holy Spirit is infinite, which means that there's a never-ending supply of joy, grace, power, and holiness in him. Our Father is most generous, and dare I say, even sloppy, when he doles out his Spirit on us. He makes no distinction, qualified or not, refined or vulgar, rich or poor, male or female, red or yellow or black or white or brown. Everyone who dares to get close enough will find themselves in the splash zone. So what's it like to be splashed with fire? It's electrifying. It's empowering. It's freeing. It's restful and yet energizing. It's thick. It's hot. It's intense. It's healing. It's beautiful, yet often messy. It's an experience that can't really be conveyed. It can only be lived. Being filled and splashed and dumped on by Holy Spirit is a unique encounter that each person must discover for himself or herself. The Bible and our passage in Acts chapter 2 does give us some insight as to how this splash party might look. People might think you're drunk. You may speak in tongues. You might prophesy. You might have visions. You might have heavenly dreams. You may receive revelation from the Father, and people may get saved. I love how generous our King is. I love that he wants us to be drunk on his life-giving, never-running dry Spirit. I love how freely he pours himself out on us. Today, I invite you to be a pitcher, as big or small as you like. In 2 Kings chapter 4, there was a story of a widow, and she had nothing left except a little bit of oil. So she reached out to the prophet Elisha for help, and he told her to gather jars, asking her neighbors for more and more jars, and then to pour her little bit of oil into them. When she did that, the oil kept pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring until the very last jar was filled up. You can have as much of Holy Spirit as you open yourself up for. He's never going to run out. So open yourself wide. Open your heart, your mind, your body, and your spirit to receive a fresh outpouring of fire. Step a little closer to the splash zone. I bless you to be filled and empowered today. I bless you to have new encounters, to see visions, to dream God dreams, to speak words from the mouth of your Father. Most of all, I bless you to be deeply connected to the fire Holy Spirit brings, and to be a fountain of living waters that splashes the people around you. My encouragement for you today is to take some time to invite Holy Spirit to come splash you some more. It's a really simple prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, give me more of you. Fill me up with your presence. After you pray this, just sit and rest and allow him to step into your heart, your mind, your life, and receive and be free. If you're wanting to do that and you're not sure if you want to listen to music, what you want to do, I recommend a song called Come Like You Promised. There's a spontaneous version of it by Bethel that's really good. It's a great place. It's echoing a lot of what's going on in Acts chapter 2, just asking Holy Spirit to come. So you can turn that on, spend a few minutes just lying before God and spread out, sit down in your car, wherever you are. Even if you don't have several minutes, if you just have a couple seconds, it's enough time to say, Holy Spirit, I want more of you. And he is always so faithful to come. Every time that I think I've gotten filled up with him, he finds a way to fill me up even more. And so it's just really special that he loves us uniquely, and he has this unique encounter for each of us. And it's not going to look the same as it did yesterday. And so while we're excited, and I love Acts chapter 2, and I love Joel 2, and the prophecy there, I'm not wanting what happened at Pentecost to happen to me. I'm wanting a new, fresh outpouring of Holy Spirit. I want him in the moment. What's he doing right now in my life? And so instead of looking back and just, oh, the good old days 2,000 years ago, what are you doing now, Father? And so the way we step into that is just giving an open expression. Come, Holy Spirit. No agenda, no expectation, nothing that we think it has to look like. It's just, you come, do what you want to do. I'm an open vessel. I am an empty pitcher. Fill me up. So I bless you today to see him, to feel him, to know him, to encounter Holy Spirit as a person and not just a force, and to become more intimately acquainted with him today. I hope you have an amazing Friday and a wonderful weekend, and I hope that you get to maybe spend some time with your mamas on Mother's Day. Bye guys, have a good one.